20 years of war. For some military children, that was their entire life. The heroism and commitment of our military community these past 2 decades is unparalleled and like nothing we have ever seen in history. We have shown up for our country, and social services have been created to provide a vast network of resources and support to the military-connected community. The generosity of the American people funded what is thought to be at its highest, 48,000 nonprofits supporting service members, reserve, guard, military families, caregivers, veterans, veteran families, Gold Star families, special immigrant visas, and our beloved military children. It hasn't been without its challenges, though. Soaring unemployment rates for young veterans, devastating losses to suicide, fragmented support for military families, a shortage of mental health care providers. The list goes on and on. But we have worked together to highlight the problems and create social change. The narrative has changed from broken warriors to assets in the community. In 2008, veteran unemployment reached its highest levels ever. But today, we have seen every veteran demographic across the board secure higher salaries than their civilian peers after transition. Some take longer to find that first opportunity, but a huge success overall. Today, the business case for hiring veterans and the value of the veteran is clear. We have moved the needle on mental health, where individuals have gone from burying their problems to seeking support and getting help. We are now moving the conversation to getting upstream and talking about resilience. Programs and providers are available for service members and their families outside of the DoD and VA systems. We have data to prove that asking for help and getting help saves lives. The Forever GI Bill has made education accessible to so many veterans and their family members, truly empowering the next generation and providing access to many first-generation college students. Thousands of organizations across this nation provide food assistance, financial literacy, legal support, and critical housing services to veterans who have fallen on hard times. Ensuring that no one falls through the cracks is exactly what Combined Arms and the other community hubs around the country are working together to coordinate. They can put these individuals on a pathway to stability in partnership with all of the essential service providers. Families are a part of the conversation too. Let's start there. Military families, veteran families, loved ones, families of the fallen, survivors, caregivers, and military children. We have access to school activities, respite relief, networking, support systems, grief counseling, therapy, and capable of highlighting the needs of under and unemployment for our military spouses. So the question is, where do we go from here? We are on our second year of a global pandemic. Our economy is disrupted, and the global giving is disrupted. We are no longer a nation at war. American interest in this conversation will wane. Collaboration will be more important than ever before. The opportunity is in front of us. There is success in collaboration to provide the best support for veterans and military families. The time is now for us to work together. We ask you to help us reflect on the past and collaborate for the future, because we are stronger together.
Well, hi everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our Family and Caregiver Collaboration Committee Breakout. This is how we kicked off our convening on Friday morning with a little James Bond inspiration for the future. We had a great opening speaker to talk to us about unconventional design thinking. If you didn't get a chance to take a look at that opening remarks, we encourage you to do so. We'll be happy to share that video with you. Ray Perez from the 75th Army Ranger Regiment shared with us some of his thoughts about how we can challenge our fundamental beliefs and use a different methodology to reframe a situation and really spur innovation. And so we really wanted to set the tone for how we're going to think about the challenges within our military ecosystem and set us up for success to think about things a little bit differently. So we appreciate you all taking the time to join us and to engage in this conversation as we think about how we can serve the family better together. So thank you again for joining us. What we're going to do is just share a little bit about who is Combined Arms and what are we up to in this past couple of years, and then where are we headed, and then how you all can get involved. So if you would share the slides, and I'll just introduce myself. My name is Kelly Finn-Stormer. I'm the Executive Director of the Combined Arms Institute, and it is my honor to welcome you here today. We have a great team and a great panel lined up, which we'll introduce to you shortly. But like I said, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about where Combined Arms and a little bit about our history and who we are. For those of you that don't know, I mean, we traditionally, if you go to the next slide, please, Tina, have been really focused on serving the transitioning veteran. And we know, as you all know and work in this space, that one of the best ways to support veterans is to also include the military family. So we've been making a really intentional effort. Combined Arms was started by veterans, focused on veterans, but we know the military family is an essential part of that conversation. So we've been really making intentional efforts to make sure that we are advocating and including the family in other ways. And so we just thank you all for your commitment in that conversation. But we are, our mission is to unite the community and to impact and accelerate the impact of veterans and military families. So the "and military families" is a new addition to our mission. And I know we don't often like to be an "and." As someone who sits as both a veteran and military family member, I feel that very much wholeheartedly. But we recognize it's a family unit and a family affair. And so we have intentional efforts to serve the family better this year and into the future. And so we appreciate that conversation. But ultimately, we want to make sure that no one falls through the cracks, right? Our mission is all about sharing together through innovative collaboration. And so that's really where we're headed into the future. If you go to the next slide, please. A little bit more about our history and our journey. And just so you know, people are like, what has Combined Arms been up to? A lot, right, is actually the summary. In 2019, Combined Arms merged with the Lone Star Veterans Association, which is all of our amazing community groups. We have our LGBTQ Veterans and Allies group, our SIVs and Allies group, that's in tech and energy, soon Caregiver community group. This is how we support veterans in the community. And we're looking at ways to scale these groups across the nation, because we know that's how people are. Military family group, we have a great military family group. But that's basically how that kind of came to be. It's Combined Arms is that technology provider bringing organizations together to serve the family. In April of 2020, we launched the Texas Veterans Network, which is basically expanding the Combined Arms model across the state of Texas, and have regional managers in Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, covering rural Texas, and soon to be, we're currently hiring for our Louisiana manager as we look to support other communities around the nation. In October of 2020, we merged with the National Association of Veterans Serving Organizations, so now known as the Combined Arms Institute, which was very formally launched in January of 2021. This is how we invest in the professional development and collaboration of our member organizations. So you all focused on the clients each and every day. We want to invest in each and every one of you to ensure that we're working together as one cohesive unit. By April of just this year, we served 10,000 unique veterans in Texas, just within 1 year of the launch of the Texas Veterans Network. And then just this past month, we launched our new client-facing assessment 2.0. And this is relevant because this was, again, an intentional shift to be more inclusive of the military family member. So if you go on into our technology intake system and get connected to resources, it's now much easier to identify as a family member, a caregiver, a spouse, partner's loved one. And so we're really proud of some of those accomplishments. If you go to the next slide, please. Ultimately, Combined Arms is the umbrella organization to the Combined Arms Institute and the Texas Veterans Network. So I know I just want to make that really clear when people are confused, like, who are you, where are you? We are all combined arms. We are one team, one family, and some of us just work on various programs underneath that umbrella. Next slide, please. Our technology is live across the state of Texas. It is also soon to be live in San Diego. It's live in Minneapolis and Miami-Dade County. We are currently mapping and under contract to make South Carolina the second connected state for veterans and military families. So we'll be working with the state of South Carolina there. We are also the lead partner for the Veteran Wellness Alliance, so getting veterans connected to clinical healthcare providers across the nation in 30 states. So it's a great partnership that we have. And that's why we're looking to bring on more national providers as we help support other communities around the nation to make sure that we have resources available to connect veterans and their families to these great programs and these opportunities. Next slide, please. Just more about the Texas Veterans Network. So we have 177 active member organizations. We have 214 organizations in the queue. There is a process that we ask our partners to go through just to make sure you are who you say you are and you do what you say you do, right? We all want to do this with integrity and make sure that we're making the best referrals that we possibly can for our family members, which includes over 700 resources and growing each and every single day. Next slide. The Texas Veterans Network covers 196 counties, and then we have a partner organization that we work with that covers San Antonio area. Just so far already, total 19,000 clients across the state of Texas, 29,000 referrals. Our organizations connect to these individuals within 26 hours. Data, we're based in the data information. We want to make sure that people are getting connected to employment, right? We know that's always an issue, but these are the top requested resources. Financial assistance, we saw a huge rise this year with the pandemic and varying factors, especially in Texas. You can look at this regionally with different storms and things that had affected Texans this year. And then, of course, the benefits assistance, right? So it's still navigating this sea of resources is still always our greatest challenges. And then you can see where we send the majority of our referrals in Texas. Next slide. The Combined Arms Institute. So as I talked about this earlier, so we are focused on elevating the military veteran ecosystem by bringing everyone together. We want to make sure that we are collaborating, that we're working together to support advocacy where relevant, research, and support each other. We know how hard it is to get those survey information out. So it's a really priority for us to make sure that everyone has the best data available to really make informed decisions on what's happening in our community. And then what we talk about is VSO 2.0. So taking our organizations to the next level, investing in their professional development through webinars, courses, and these different conversations of best practice sharing. If you go to the next slide. In the course, since we've launched, right, we've provided over 1,200 hours of professional development, 15 events and webinars this year, 1 military connected course, which had amazing ROI around the fundraising academy and partnership with we have. And then of course we have 5 committees, which you saw summarized in that opening video. And we want to continue to iterate and talk together about how we can open up these conversations and supporting this community together. Next slide. So through that, we know that our veterans and family members connect to an average of 2.4 resources. So if you're an employment service provider, we know that, that those individuals might also be looking for volunteer opportunities or financial literacy courses or access to higher education. And so we can connect in whatever service you might provide, you can then refer others into the system. And so we have this process and we're launching next year, the 2022 check-in challenge, which would be great for you all to participate in. If you go to the next slide, please, Tina. We have data where we can look to see who's making the most referrals. In this case, Next Stop is one of our employment partners, has made the most referrals of all the organizations that are through our network. This slide's hard to read a little bit because it's tiny, but what we want to do is make sure that we invite you all into this portfolio. Go to the next slide, please. We are launching the 2022 check-in challenge, which is basically asking our clients, what else do you need? So if you're serving veterans, families, children, you can ask them what else do they need. Are you looking for social connectivity, support, volunteer opportunities? You need some financial assistance. And we can connect them to those resources through this great network, which is why we want to invite you all in to that portfolio. This will be an incentivized challenge. And so just as a way to kick it off, if we go to the next slide, we wanted to appreciate our highest referring organizations. And so we have awarded Next Stop $5,000 this year just for unincentivized referring out to each and every one of our partner organizations. So we're going to put some more things around this, but we're really excited and just grateful. Again, Next Stop is an employment partner, and they refer out to other partners across the ecosystem. So it's great to see that and see us all working together in collaboration. But for those of you I know, as we were Houston based and then moved across the state of Texas, we're again making an intentional shift so that we know that many of you may not be formal member organizations, but we would like to invite you all into that portfolio. And if you'll go to the next slide, I just wanted to share a little bit about if you would want to have some more conversation, you can of course reach out to any one of us, or just express interest in this. If you go to the institute/membership, this is where you can learn about the benefits and opportunities, as well as fill out that form so that we can get you through the process and start working on a more formalized partnership. And we do welcome all of you into that fold. So that's all for me, just a little bit about kind of what's happened, the great celebration. Again, we stand on the shoulders of our partner organizations and are just so grateful to be able to work together as we navigate this system together. So I'm going to turn it over to Tina, who is going to introduce, I think, our amazing committee chair.
All right, thank you so much, Kelly, for that great introduction. I am the Partner Development Manager for Combined Arms on the Institute side. So I process all of the membership applications that she just mentioned when you go onto our site and apply to become a member organization. I'm going to go ahead back to my screen sharing. And I think you missed one slide for upcoming events that we have coming up. So we do have a couple of upcoming Institute events, so feel free to check those out and join us for those. And now I'd like to introduce Hannah O'Brien, who is the committee chair for the Family and Caregiver Committee. Started out as just the Caregiver Committee, but it's been an honor to work with her as I pass over the reins of collaboration to Jason, our newest collaboration manager. So Hannah she has a master's in social work from UT Austin, and she had her bachelor's degree in law and society from American University in Washington, D.C. So we work together on multiple levels. We also are partnered with the Institute for Military and Veteran Family Wellness at UT Austin, where her and her team and Dr. Elisa Bora also help consult with Combined Arms and develop and analyze our outcome measurements. And they have helped provide a lot of really great recommendations to our newest assessment so that we can capture that data for our family members. And they also house the Veteran Spouse Network, one of our member organizations. So Hannah, she's going to give us a brief overview of the committee.
Thank you, Tina. And hello, everybody. I'm so excited to see all y'all's faces and to get into our speakers and a great conversation I think that we're going to have today about how best to serve you guys and how best to serve the family. As Tina mentioned, I'm with UT Austin and the Veteran Spouse Network. I'm a veteran spouse myself, so this work is very close to my heart. And yeah, we've kind of had, I've been the chair for the last 2 years, and we've had a nice history of moving from caregiver to wrapping in the family and really making sure that we're trying to be as accessible to all of these diverse groups within the larger family. And that's really our mission, to seek to understand the experience of the military, transitioning, and veteran family in order to create those strategies to best serve them as a group of family serving organizations, which we all are here today to do just that. I was super excited when we became the family committee. Our history has been honestly quite client facing. We did a lot of like caregiver events and things like that. And so as we move into looking forward into 2022, we really want to kind of pull back and have that wider lens with you guys as the member orgs, really seeing like what are these gaps in services, how can we better be supporting you with professional development. And I think a lot of what we'll end up doing will stem from this conversation today and what we hear from you guys. But we didn't want to lose touch with that client-facing activities and really creating these safe spaces for caregivers and family members. So as Kelly mentioned earlier, we are creating a caregiver community group to do just that. And that is going to be led by my former co-chair, Miss Odyssey Lundy. So I didn't know if Odyssey, if you wanted to come on real quick and introduce yourself or say anything about the community group before we get to our speakers.
Hello, everyone. As Hannah mentioned, I am the new community leader for the Houston Caregivers, and what I will do is provide content and information on Combined Arms Caregiver Facebook page, as well as work with the members of the Caregiver Board to plan social and outreach engagements. And last but not least, I myself am also a caregiver and have been for 13 years. So it's always an honor to be able to work in this space.
Thanks, Odyssey. And then also an announcement, I have been doing this for 2 years. I think we would love some new blood on this committee. So if anyone here today is interested in leading this committee, serving as a co-chair, what have you, please reach out to us. You can either just reach out to institute@combinedarms.us or us, US, or you can reach out to Jason Wise, who, as Tina mentioned, is the new collaboration manager. And then of course, you can always reach out to me or Odyssey if you are curious about what this role looks like. It's been really exciting, and I think we've come a long way, and I'm excited to see where we head. So with that said, I think we can move on and talk about these awesome speakers we're going to have. So here's just a little taste. We'll do a little intros of everybody, and each speaker will kind of give a little presentation, and we'll give some time in case you have any questions like that are specific to what they presented on before moving into the next speaker. And then once everyone has finished, we'll do a little moderated Q&A as well before we go into our small group breakouts. But I'm really excited about this panel. I think it really covers a wide range of organizations serving kind of different subgroups within the family and serving them in different ways. So we have Dr. Shelly Kimball with the Military Family Advisory Network, who's going to present on some awesome research that I've been really lucky to be a part of as well. We also have Sako Santavale, and if I did not pronounce that right, she will correct me. And thank you. And she's with the Military Spouse Program with Hiring Our Heroes. So she'll be presenting on some research around that. We have Robert Brott, who's a lead clinician at Endeavors in Colleen, I believe. And he's going to be talking to us about his work with veterans and their caregivers. And then last but certainly not least, we have Miss Hannah Hutler-Boyd with Camp Corral, which serves our military kiddos. So let's get into it. All right, first up, we have Dr. Shelly Kimball, who is the Senior Director of Research and Program Evaluation for the Military Family Advisory Network. In that role, she is in charge of all their research efforts. They have an awesome biennial survey that I think is out right now, if it's the one I'm thinking of, as well as they do some of this topic-specific specialized research that she's going to be presenting on around food insecurity in our population. But basically, MFAM exists to gather research around the real-life experiences of military families to better understand what support needs they have. And they do that through research. And because of the amazing research that they've done, they've been able to present to the White House and the Pentagon, and really been able to shape policies around things that are affecting our military families. She's also a professor at the George Washington University, and is an Air Force daughter, Army sister, and husband to a retired Coast Guardsman. So I am very excited to turn it over to Dr. Kimball to share the awesome work they're doing.
Thanks so much, Hannah, and it's great to be here. I'm going to share my screen and share some slides as I walk you through some of our work. So if you just bear with me. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about our organization and the work that we're doing in food insecurity in the military family community. We define that in many ways. That does include veterans, retirees, divorced spouses, surviving spouses, active duty, any way you can look at the military family. So a little bit about the Military Family Advisory Network. We are an 8-year-old nonprofit, and really our focus is to make sure that anybody who fits in that military connected life has the support systems that they need to thrive. So we focus a lot on convening. And so I love all that I'm hearing today, because we really believe in that too, that working together, we're so much stronger. So much of our work is data driven. Lucky for me, keeps me in business. But what is really wonderful about our model is that we really talk to families about what they need, what they're experiencing. So, and then we look for ways to support. So this is going to be a great example of how we work that, but also to give you more information about what we're seeing in the military and veteran family communities. So our organization made food insecurity a priority in 2017. It was during that year that we started our research in this vein. Like Hannah mentioned, we do a biennial survey, and it's a support programming survey, meaning it's looking at that holistic support system. But within that system, we're looking at food insecurity, and we have been for these years. We also look at it as part of a whole. So we not only look at those rates and frequencies and experiences, but also how they're tying to other things. So I'll tell you a little bit more about some exciting research that Hannah's been working with us on that we think is really going to help move this issue forward. But first, I wanted to tell you where we've been, what we know so far. So in 2017, that was the year we really found that this was an issue that was national. It wasn't a one-off. It wasn't among a certain population. It ran farther and wider than we thought. So in 2019, just before the pandemic, we fielded our support programming survey. And that year we really refined our data collection. We're using the USDA's 6-item short form food security scale to understand the depth and breadth of families' experiences. So that year we found that 1 in 8 of our respondents was food insecure, according to that scale. We also found that when we isolated active duty members, 1 in 6 were food insecure. And then when we've looked even more deeply in that data, when we isolate those who left service, veterans and retirees, then isolate that again and look at veterans compared to retirees, we find that veterans are struggling in ways that retirees are not, across all kinds of social determinants of health. And food insecurity is part of that. So we wrap them in the fold here to help find some solutions. Now, part of the way that we research is qualitatively. We feel like it's a benefit that we can give to this research space to help everyone understand exactly what life is like. So we ask a lot of open-ended questions. We do interviews and focus groups where we're getting that lived experience of military families so that we can really show what is happening there. So here you can see some quotes from that research, just to give you an idea of what our families are telling us about what life is like. Some of the themes that you see here, feeding kids first, or getting help for kids because there's less stigma, or feeding the soldier first. Those are things that we see year after year, conversation after conversation. One other thing that we know from our families' experiences is they're not seeking help as often as we would like them to. And so that's going to lead into some of our efforts here that I'll tell you at the end of this presentation. But I think that many of you have probably seen something similar in our veteran and military family communities, especially when it comes to food support. So because those original measurements I showed you were pre-pandemic, we wanted to know what was happening within the pandemic. We were hearing nationally across all populations that there was an increased need for food support, more food insecurity. So we did another study in the first quarter of this year just to understand what was happening among these populations. As you can see here, we also saw an increase in frequency. 1 in 5 of our participants was experiencing food insecurity. And you can see that that was clear across across the scale, that USDA scale. If you've not used that scale before to understand hunger, it's a 6-item scale that helps you see the depth and breadth of experience. And those that have at a lower end of food insecurity, we are seeing those people less likely to access help. At the higher end of food insecurity, that's hunger. And those are the ones that we do see more likely to go seek help than the full population of those experiencing food insecurity. One of the other things that we wanted to know during the pandemic was what is happening? Is the pandemic causing anything? Is it having any kind of effect here? So we asked a pretty general open-ended question about how the pandemic works in this construct to those who were food insecure on this scale. So all of these answers here you see are coming from families who are struggling to get enough food on their tables. They gave us 5 primary pressures that they're experiencing. So the first 2 you see here were unexpected lifestyle changes and financial instability. The financial instability was marked by recently cut incomes, unreimbursed moving expenses, and existing debt. The unexpected lifestyle changes were things like unemployment, fewer hours at work, leaving jobs to take care of kids, the loss of free and reduced meals at home that then they now had to provide in their homes and pay for, and that was affecting the household budget. They were also describing difficulty accessing healthy food, and they also described an increased cost of living across the board. The accessing healthy food was focused on that supply chain interruption or having difficulty getting access to moderately priced and healthy foods. We're still hearing a lot of this in the research that we're doing. The increased cost of living, they were describing increased costs just across the board that was putting that additional pressure on. One thing that we know with our families is that when they're balancing things like home, electric, bills, food is the one that they tend to tell us is easier to try to find help with elsewhere, or that they might push aside. And then our 5th one here is that pre-pandemic challenges. If they were experiencing challenges before the pandemic, those are things like having a difficulty finding a place to live, already being unemployed, health issues, single parents, things like that. The pandemic just magnified all of that and made it that much worse. So in answer to all of these things that I've shown you here, we're also working on really a long-term solution research project. And this is where Hannah's been helpful to us. We're working in partnership with UT Austin to interview families who are experiencing food insecurity right now, to understand what happened, what brought them from point A to point B. Our teams are talking to people just about every single day. In fact, I had an interview this morning, I will have more tomorrow, where we're really getting into that lived experience, what led here, so that we can back up a little bit and explain to everybody what those pain points are, so that we can all come together and provide those supports before they get to the point of food insecurity. But one thing we also know is that while we're researching, there are families that are hungry. And so our organization is committed to providing 1 million meals this year to military veteran families in need. We're about 2/3 of the way through. In fact, we have events this weekend, and we're hoping that we're going to cross the 3/4 of the way finish line soon. We've chosen cities where we saw the highest frequencies of food insecurity, and Texas is a state where we saw the highest frequencies, and we've seen that consistently. So we've already been in Texas, and we'll be back again. But if you're interested in learning more about our organization or this kind of research or this project particularly, come see us at militarymeals.org.
Thanks so much, Dr. Kimball. I mean, I can say anecdotally from doing these interviews, they've been so enlightening. And one thing that's really stood out to me is how appreciative everyone is that we're asking these questions and having these conversations with them about real serious stuff. So if anyone has anyone who they think would like to take part in this interview, like definitely push them Shelly's Way, they get a $50 grocery gift card for participating in the studies. And I think actually, I might even ask Sharon to say something. I think we're set up in the Combined Arms portal to be able to get referrals to us that will then we'll push towards that study. So. Did anyone have any like very specific questions they wanted to follow up with Shelly on? We'll have time to do more questions later, but wanted to give a few moments. Cool. All right. Well, we will see how the conversation continues on, and we'll continue on to our next presenter. So our next presenter is Hisako Santavale, and she is the Senior Advisor of Research and Innovation for the Military Spouse Program at Hiring Our Heroes. In that work, she manages the strategic execution of research and initiatives that support both military spouses and veterans' ability to thrive in their workplace. Her interests stem from her own experiences as the spouse of a retired Marine, and she uses the research that they do to increase the general public's awareness and understanding of the complex issues that are facing today's military and veteran families. Her research and advocacy efforts have created economic opportunities for military spouses, helped shape policies and programs for military families, and mobilize communities to help those impacted by the military lifestyle. And she's with us today to be able to talk about some of the research behind their work and what they're doing to help military spouses thrive in the workforce. So I will turn it over to Hisako.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I don't have any slides to share, so I'll just kind of have a conversation with y'all. I might be throwing in some stats and stuff, but I will reference like our reports at the end, so that way you can go back and read it at your leisure. And then obviously I'm around for any questions that you may have. But my name is Hisako Santavale. As Hannah mentioned, I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Research and innovation is still relatively new as a official arm of Hiring Our Heroes. I'm only the second person to hold this role within the organization. But because we're here now in this official capacity, we've been doing a lot more really formalized research initiatives. And so the research that I'm going to be talking to you guys about today are covering kind of two areas that we've been really looking into more recently. One is the opportunity areas for employing military spouses. But when we're thinking about serving the family at home, we also can't forget about that impact that this employment, or really lack thereof, has on the emotional well-being of military spouses as well. So you'll hear me weaving in some conversations about well-being as it relates to their employment in this conversation too. So our primary research that I mentioned is really focused today on the results that we published in our Military Spouse Career Journeys report. And we conducted that last year in 2 phases with Grow with Google and Burning Glass Technologies. Now this study analyzed feedback that was collected through 3 focus groups. And so that's really when you bring military spouses together with some researchers and have that conversation. Over the summer of 2019 was when we conducted that. And then we did a follow-up survey after that online that received about 1,500 spouse respondents, and that was conducted following those focus groups in the fall. Over half of those respondents were employed in some capacity. So that was either full-time employment, part-time employment, or maybe they were self-employed. But we also found that about 1/3 were unemployed. So this is even before the pandemic. We were reporting about 1/3 military spouses in our research were unemployed or reported to be unemployed. Now, this study revealed that there were some key interesting findings. Our respondents reported that they rarely had a work situation that they considered ideal, and sometimes they chose to live apart from their service members for education or job opportunities. In some cases, service members even decided to leave the military altogether to support their spouse's work or career, which really means the spouses who face that under or unemployment challenges contribute to that loss of talent in our all-volunteer force. So it is a readiness issue. Part of the challenge is probably this mismatch of skills between military spouses and their employment opportunities, which we also saw in our survey. Military spouses felt that they had avoided applying for a job at times because they didn't feel like they had the right skills. Whether or not they really did or not, that's what they believed. And so they avoided applying for some jobs because of that. but they had also experienced taking a job that they found that was uninteresting, low paying, or didn't use all the skills that they did have. Despite the mismatch, though, our findings did still find some alignment in in-depth, in-demand job opportunities in career areas such as business management and operations, human resources, and marketing and public relations, which we still find those to be key interest areas, still in-demand areas for military spouses who are seeking employment. Spouses in our study were also highly educated and highly likely to pursue additional training or education. 3 out of 4 of our respondents had at least a 4-year degree, and at least about 80% had roughly pursued additional training or education during their time as a military spouse. Even despite all that, a majority of our respondents were still very likely to pursue even more training or education to improve their job or career prospects for the future. And the most important consideration for them when thinking about pursuing additional education or training was that they could get skills that they could use no matter where they lived. Some of this may be a result from challenges that we found spouses faced in navigating the resources to find employment opportunities to align with the skills that they already had. A lot of our respondents found that it was challenging to navigate all the plethora of resources, despite all of our well-intentioned places that we're coming from that spouse perspective. It was slightly overwhelming for them. Respondents from our study indicated that they tried to rely more on military-specific organizations for general resources perspectives, but when seeking employment, they were more likely to look for a job using online job boards or social media. When you're a military spouse, though, networking could be a critical avenue for them. But when you're moving every 2 to 3 years, you don't necessarily always know or have that knowledge of where to look or whom to follow in your specific area or skill set of need. And so that can be also challenging as well. So if there was really kind of one silver lining to COVID, I think it's that increased buzz around offering greater flexibility at work and remote roles. For spouses who want to work, that flexibility conversation, remote work have been something that they've been looking for long before the pandemic. So lucky for us, that conversation is at the forefront of a lot of employers. So hopefully we see some changes as a result of that. But entrepreneurship and business in the form of business ownership and self-employment have become even more of a viable opportunity for military spouses even today, because it offers kind of that alternative, innovative way to create that flexibility and remote opportunities. Our study found this to be the case over more traditional reasons why somebody in the civilian world may seek self-employment, which generally tend to be they're trying to pursue a passion or idea or creating some sort of environment of being their own boss. For spouses, however, they ranked flexibility as their top reason for seeking self-employment or becoming an entrepreneur. Our study also showed that an overwhelming majority of spouses who identified as entrepreneurs relied on personal savings to fund their business, and the skills they felt they needed the most were building a website or social media presence to build that client base. Now, I said at the very beginning that we would be talking about well-being as well, so I do want to touch on that really quickly. Spouse respondents in our study that we conducted last summer in 2020 indicated that employment does have a positive impact on their well-being because it gave them a sense of purpose. It allowed them reclaim their sense of self, allowed them to be more than just a spouse or a parent, and enhance their family relationships and improve their overall quality of life. Now, this is a critically missing component, I think, in the military spouse conversation, which is oftentimes focused on readiness and oftentimes focused on just that academic impact. So well-being is certainly an opportunity area, especially for clinicians that are working with military spouses, to understand that there is a true impact when a military spouse has been enduring long-term unemployment, which is often the case. So there's a lot more to read and to learn in our 2 reports. You can find that on our Hiring Our Heroes website, hiringourheroes.org, as well as the plethora of resources that we offer for veterans, transition service members, and spouses themselves. So thanks for the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much, Hisako. Yeah, we have a lot of peer veteran and military spouse volunteers in our organization, and they kind of describe themselves often as professional volunteers, which is great too, but right, that's sometimes all they've been able to do. So the work y'all are doing is awesome to help them become more than that if they would like to be. And your focus on wellness is a great segue to our next speaker, who is going to talk about just that. Mr. Robert Broad is the lead clinician at Endeavors. He's a retired Army chaplain himself, and he's been working with soldiers and veteran families for over 20 years. He himself has deployed to Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan and been awarded the Bronze Star Medal and the Combat Action Badge. He's been a licensed clinician since 2013, specializing in PTSD, also an ordained minister, experienced in faith-based counseling, as well as an approved supervisor with the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, and a certified counselor with the National Board of Certified Counselors. So I'm excited to turn it over to Mr. Brott to talk about wellness efforts with veterans and their caregivers. And I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Such an honor and privilege, and greetings from Endeavors, which is under the umbrella of the Co-Military Veterans Network. We minister primarily to military families, individuals, couples, families. That includes faith-based counseling as well. And we have also recently opened up our doors to active duty as well, with a TRICARE referral. That's no problem to see people actually on active duty. Our clinicians are highly credentialed, highly capable. Many of them have military affiliations. Even our receptionist is a Gold Star wife. And so that whether it's through marriage or a family of origin, a lot of strong military connections. Our clinicians are either licensed professional counselors, licensed marriage and family therapists such as myself, licensed clinical social worker, and they've got not only the credentials, but they've also got the attitude and the empathy to go with those, and appreciation for the military that goes along with it. We used evidence-based interventions, and so we use cognitive behavioral therapy primarily, and that is our go-to therapy. But we also do a cognitive processing therapy, particularly for trauma, to include PTSD. We also use EMDR, and recently a lot of our clinicians are getting trained in Gottman. We have quite an increase in couples requests, and so Gottman is really coming in handy. So we primarily have a short-term therapy model. So we see people for about 10 sessions. We're really more of a stopgap measure. Maybe a lot of people, that's really all they need. They're just sort of stuck, and we just sort of help them get unstuck. Then of course, through the short-term model, after several sessions, a lot of times we have the realization that this person really does need long-term therapy. And so we have a case manager who will make sure that they find the long-term assets that they need. So we do a lot of long-term referrals, but for a lot of veterans, they get what they need with the short-term model. And after 6, 8, 10, a dozen sessions, they're good to go. And a lot of times they may come back, circle back around later, and that's fine. But it's an opportunity to help people get a lot of referrals from the VA. I have nothing but good to, I know there's a lot of controversy around the VA, but we have nothing good to say about the VA. They do a lot of good, and they send us a lot of clients. And so I personally run a PTSD group, and it's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's cognitive behavioral therapy based, but it really acts a lot as a support group as well. Now, people just don't want to leave. They want to just keep coming. And I talked about, closing it out, and they're like, no, we love this group. We want this group. We need this group. So we just continue on, and it's open, and it seems to meet a lot of veteran needs. Of course, it meets that veteran to veteran need, which veterans that are in combat, sometimes it takes another veteran who's been in combat to really kind of get them where they're at. And so it serves a great need. We use a lot of assessment measures to document progress, to first of all find out where people are. And so we use the quality of life QLES measurement. And my experience with that is that it goes up about 99.5% of the time. I think there's 1 or 2 cases where it did not, but most all the time, by the time they finish their short-term therapy with us, that QLES goes up, so quality of life improves. We also use the Columbia, the CSSRS, to keep a tight hold on suicidal ideations, suicidal actions. We have a high-risk meeting every week. In fact, our high-risk meeting starts in about 7 minutes. Then we got plenty of good clinicians to handle it without me, so they'll be just fine. But we always make sure that we take our clients who are at risk for suicide, and we make sure that we do some good peer-to-peer support, making sure that everybody has what they need. We do also have a nurse practitioner who does not substitute for somebody's psychiatrist, does not substitute for a provider. But if there's a short-term need for medications, it sort of gets them over the hump through the interim until they can get to a long-term provider. We also use the GAD-7 to measure anxiety, the PHQ-9 to measure depression. And then, of course, before I became lead clinician, I did a lot of PTSD cases, and almost every time we use the PCL-5 which is basically the DSM in 20 questions on PTSD, and it historically goes down. So almost all the cases, the PCL-5 does drop. Sometimes there's a little incentive for the veteran not to get too good because it might interfere with some compensation or whatever. I don't judge them on that. I just put down what they say. It's all self-reporting, but most of them do drop in their symptoms of PTSD. And so it's we're really, really proud of what we do. We serve all branches of the military and the family members. We do not have to have a DEERS report to find out who is actually family. If they say that's my spouse or that's my child, whatever, we take them at their word. And obviously, we screen to make sure everything is legal when we take on minors and so forth. But if they define their family member as brother, sister, spouse, whatever, we roll with it, and that's what we do. I've noticed in my personal experience and in working with veterans, I know all I can speak for is the Army. I can't speak for the Air Force, Navy, or Marines, although I'm hoping that their Soldier for Life, or whatever they call their ACAP or leaving the Army program, is really solid in the Army. It's a good program. It's not perfect, and everybody's experience is different. There's probably some people right now that say it didn't work for me, but my experience with it was really quite good. The Army, I think, did a really good job making sure that soldiers have opportunity to transition into the civilian sector, taking their MOS skills and translating them into civilian skills, resume writing, job fairs, etc. It's not 100%, but I think it's reasonable, and I think that the Army does as good a job as is can be expected within reality. Sometimes soldiers are just not motivated to leverage that asset, and they fall through the cracks out of neglect. And that's rather unfortunate, but I'm glad there are so many agencies and so many people on board, such as the people I'm speaking with, to help capture them, whether it's just the job market was just too tough, or whether it was lack of self-motivation, or whether it was an uncooperative chain of command that would not allow them to go to these sessions, and they just worked them to death until they actually left the Army, which does happen a lot. So soldiers fall through the cracks for many reasons. Sometimes it just is the job market. It can be tough. Sometimes it's the soldier's own negligence. Sometimes it's an uncooperative chain of command. Whatever the case may be, sometimes you just have a hard time connecting the dots. But for whatever reason, I'm glad to know that there are so many agencies out there to help the soldier find employment. I know in my personal experience working with soldiers and airmen primarily, soldiers and airmen primarily, the paradigm transition from military to civilian can be very, very difficult. And Sometimes the soldier has a hard time making that paradigm transition to, I'm not an E7 anymore. And this person who is half my age, has half my education, and 10% of my training is now my boss. And they have a difficult time being humble and acknowledging that the rules are different in the civilian sector. And they really, really struggle with that. And so we can obviously, help them with that, and help them with maybe adapting a little humility and helping them change their thought patterns to, you're not official, you're not the certified leader that you used to be. You've got to reestablish your credentials. They don't, a lot of soldiers don't like that. Some accept it, they got it. They know they went from being Colonel Jones or Sergeant First Class Jones to now Dave with a t-shirt. And working for Jerry here, who's half his age at half their former pay. That's tough. That's a very tough transition for them. But as we have a lot of patience to work with them, and that's just where they come from a lot of times. So I dug up I didn't have a lot of R&D just at my thumb. I wish I had more, but I did. So I tapped into the VA for this particular subject that I know that we're discussing here today, and that is caregivers. We do work with a lot of caregivers, and it's very stressful to be a caregiver. And so just a really good definition straight from the VA is an unpaid individual, spouse, partner, family member who assists with activities of daily living, such as eating, bathing, dressing, or medical tasks, such as taking medication or engaging in required exercise. And so this is not yesterday's hot off the press research. I know we have some R&D people here who probably have some more accurate research, but this, as of the date I went to, approximately 34 million Americans provided unpaid health care to an adult of 50 years or older in the prior 12 months. Okay, so that's a lot of unpaid volunteer health care. And spending an average of 25 hours per week providing health care. But if it's a spouse or a partner, that goes from 25 hours a week to 45 hours per week. Now, Brent, that is certainly a recipe for burnout. And so nearly 16 million adult family caregivers care for someone with Alzheimer's disease or dementia. That's probably even higher now. More than 5 million caregivers provide care for former or current military personnel in the US, and 20% care for somebody who served since 9/11. So that's a lot. Interesting that the post 9/11 vets needed help for stressful situations versus 49% for pre-9/11 or 53% for civilians. So some of you might have gotten lost in the numbers. Basically, it's the post 9/11 vets needed more assistance than the pre-9/11 vets or civilians. Now, whether that is because the post 9/11 vets are more prone to say, I need help, I'm willing to ask for help, whereas the pre-9/11 vets were maybe a little more proud, saying, I'm just going to suck it up and drive on. Don't know, but these are the stats. So the post 9/11 vets are in higher need than the pre 9/11 vets or the civilian sector. And 38% of caregivers for post 9/11 vets met criteria for probable depression, compared to 20% of caregivers for pre 9/11 vets or 20% of civilians. So again, the caregivers for post 9/11 vets is their probability for meeting criteria for depression is almost twice as likely for pre 9/11 vets or civilians. There is a nice little program that many of you are probably aware of, the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers, PCAFC, supports caregivers for post 9/11 era who need assistance, whether that assistance is either with supervision protection, with a monthly stipend of $600 to $2,300 per month. And I personally know of a case where the VA paid out the money to the caregivers, and it really worked for them. So that's really nice. Required caregiver training covers such topics as caregiver self-care, nutrition, exercise, caregiver skills, such as taking vital signs, infection control, home safety, support groups, or just respite. I think that's what a lot of them just want, is just respite. So then finally here, just a few stats to close out with. No surprise, but caregiver depression is common following a family member's stroke. And then problem-solving interventions can be helpful to lower the depression. And approximately 500,000 veterans have dementia. And approximately 80% of these receive care at home from informal caregivers. So big topic, caregiving. There are resources to assist, to remunerate, but wow, it's a big burden that these unpaid caregivers hunch over. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Broad. It is such a huge issue. Of course, my dogs are going to bark now. It actually segues quite nicely into our final presenter, because she's going to talk about military children who can often come in and serve in that caregiver role as well, and they have their own unique needs around that. So I am going to turn it over. Of course, I just lost my thing that has all your information, Hannah. I have no idea where it is. But Miss Hannah Hutler-Boyd is with Camp Corral, who provides awesome enrichment opportunities for our military connected kiddos. And since I completely lost all my information about Hannah, I'll just go ahead and turn it straight over to you. We're excited to have her talk about what Camp Corral does, as well as some of this new information and research they have around needs of the children and that caregiver role. So turn it over to you, Hannah. Hello,
Thanks, Hannah. I would prefer a non-lengthy introduction anyway, so that works wonderfully for me. And Tina, thank you for managing the slides here. Yes, I am Hannah with Camp Corral, and our mission is to transform the lives of children of wounded, ill, and fallen military heroes by providing camp advocacy and enrichment programs. And I have just a couple of things that I really want to share with y'all that has come out of our research and our work with families over the last couple of years. So Tina, if you would like to go to the next slide. Like Hannah said, yes, caregiving. We have been talking about kids as caregiving, and while it can be challenging for parents and guardians and other adults to admit it, kids do take on caregiving responsibilities in our wounded warrior homes, even when they're not asked. And so the big thing that we have been talking about at Camp Corral is changing our perspective a little bit and providing education and awareness to the community who is serving the population, as well as parents themselves. So to give a good example of changing and adapting that perspective, when we directly asked parents if their children were providing support for the service member in their household, 30% of parents shared that yes, they were. However, when we gave those parents a list of activities or activities of daily living as defined by being able to take care of yourself as an individual, 70% of parents shared that their child was doing at least one task on that list. And that number continues to go up in what we're seeing. So our children are providing care in their homes. And it's important for us to be able to empower and provide education for the parents and the guardians and the adults in their lives to understand a little bit about what that has as an impact on that child. And so one of the things that we're looking at, and we will have preliminary data on this come November timeframe, is from the children themselves. How is this impacting the children themselves, and how do they see that? What is their perception? One of the things we know is that it can reduce the amount of time that children are able to spend in social engagements, in extracurricular activities, building those social emotional skills, which is something I'll talk about in my next point. And so looking at how children provide care, it's happening in so many different ways, from taking care of siblings because the well parent is providing direct care to that service member, to assisting with medication management, moving around the house, helping to navigate the community. So many different aspects of caregiving that children are providing in their homes. So my number one takeaway on this topic is encouraging everyone to look at how you are supporting adult caregivers and assessing, can those supports be offered to children? How can we extend those supports to the children in caregiving roles? And Tina, could you go to my next slide, please? The other big concern, of course, we're all talking about it, is mental health. And our parents and guardians are super concerned about their child's mental health. This last year, particularly the last 2 months for our community, have been trying, and our children are watching and they are seeing what's happening on the news, what's happening in our communities, on top of what they're actually going through themselves. So mental health is definitely a concern. And we have more than half of our parents reporting that mental health is a concern for their child through the pandemic and currently where we are. And you see, sorry, the post office just pulled up and I'm waiting for the dogs to bark. So the mental health is a concern. And when we dig a little bit deeper into that, we know that 50% of parents are saying they're concerned. But when we look at those self-harm and suicide ideation numbers, it becomes less of a pleasant picture even, and something that I think we as a community really need to talk about and really need to acknowledge. So when we asked parents if at least one of the children in their household had talked about engaging in self-harm in the past year, on our survey this summer, 13% said that yes, their child had at least talked about it. And pre-COVID, we asked parents very specifically if their child had actually participated in self-harm or had suicide ideation. They had a plan. And 10% of our parents said yes. So for our population pre-COVID, we're talking about 300 to 400 children from those families that are participating in self-harm and have suicide ideation. We talk about it a lot on the veteran side. We're getting better about talking about it on the spouse and caregiver side. We're not talking about it with the children, and it's something that needs to be brought to the forefront. And as we're planning supports and programs and initiatives, figuring out, like Kelly said, we're including the whole family, and those are the children too. How do we include the children in that? And so again, same challenge as before. If you're already providing services for the veteran, for the spouse, for caregivers, how can you extend those services to children as well? And then Tina, can you move to the next slide, please? So connection, really, how are we going to combat those two things? The challenges that arise from caregiving as well as the mental health concerns. Connection. I've heard it said a couple of times already today about how important connection is for the veteran themselves. There's peer connections for the veteran, how important connection is for the spouse. That's also the case for children. And oftentimes we don't think about that because kids have their friend groups in schools and people that they can play with on their teams and their youth groups. But a lot of our children, especially in our veteran community, are in rural communities or not in a place where we have a large veteran population, and we're not identifying those children for teachers, for school guidance counselors, so that they can address those needs and help those children connect. And so we know at Camp Corral that 88% of our families have shared that this is the only program for their child where they are able to connect to other kids who have this shared experience, who have a wounded warrior in their household, and how important that is. That the vast majority of our parents also say that that's the number one reason why their child participates in this program, so they can build those connections, so they can find that tribe. So how can we, looking at the programs we already have in place, help facilitate those connections? So if you're working with veterans and caregivers, are you collecting information on intake about the children in their household and helping them build connections with other veterans and caregivers and spouses who have children who may be able to be those support systems for one another? The parents are getting that support system, the kids are getting support system, looking at the whole family. How do we provide that support? And that's really the biggest thing. I know Amy Taft is on this call, and one of the things that she has said multiple times is it is amazing what a child can process if they just have the opportunity to talk to and engage with peers and work through and process those feelings. And so being able to provide that opportunity for kids is huge. And I'm moving real fast here because I'm feeling like we're running out of time. If you want to move to my last slide, thank you, Tina. So if you don't take anything else away from this conversation, what I really want to highlight for everybody is we understand that in order for the veteran to heal, the whole family has to take part in that healing. And at Camp Corral, we start with the child and encourage everyone else to look at how they can bring the children into that process. If you want to see more about the research we've got going on, check out our website on the resources page. We also, thanks to Kelly for hosting, did a release of the 15 things military and veterans kids want you to do recently, and took the feedback of over 2,000 military connected children of what they want civilians and providers in the field to know about their lives. So that's a super powerful video that's on our website and on Psych Armors as well. Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Sako, and thank you, Shelly, for this information. And it's just, in some ways, it's so unfair to like put it all together, and in other ways, it's like, but this is our family, right? So what we wanted to do was to bring together some of these challenges that we're experiencing as a family unit and work together, right? In some ways, we are all micro communities within the family, but we need the support of each other because these are all interconnected challenges. Like we can't have one without the other. And so we do recognize that we have some amazing panelists, but our goal was to really present a landscape analysis as to some of the greatest challenges. And then we are going to, if you have some big questions that you'd like to ask our panelists,